Well, hello again. This is Jane's Adventures in Storyland. This is my number 4 video recording where I talk about writing different stories, what I've gone through, etc. in there. Right now, I am kind of ticked off because people keep sending things, different companies put things up on the screen while I'm trying to record. So it just kind of ticks me off, but I can't. That's okay. I won't buy anything from them because I keep pumping things up on my screen. Anyway, the other thing too is I view my past videos, and my last one was where I read part of the book, part of chapter 1 to you, of the Red Bitch's Revenge. And I'm very sorry. I am a very poor reader. I'm a good writer, but I'm a poor reader. I sounded terrible, and I'm sorry. I won't do that again. One of the things I really wanted to talk about on this one, besides the Red Bitch's Revenge, is fantasy versus fact. Now, we were having a discussion, a friend of mine, another writer friend of mine, and I were having a discussion recently about fantasy and fact. Most stories have a certain amount of fact in them, even if it's a fantasy story. And most fact-based stories have a certain amount of fantasy in them too. So we just have to look and kind of sort it out. It's what makes the story. I like to think of fantasies like they're clouds. Okay, so you can be writing a fact-based story with fantasies that are like the high streaky clouds, the thin streaky clouds above. So there's a little bit of fantasy in that fact, and it's just streaking through it. It's not strictly blue sky. Or you can have a lot of love in your fantasy, which is like the white fluffy clouds, the ones that are really beautiful. They're high and they're white and they're really fluffy and they're very white. And that really to me means love. And so that's kind of the love part of it. Then the other one is where the underside of the cloud is either red or gold or both at the same time. And that can mean either hate or love. That's, again, up to you, but that's part of the fantasy. And the other one about the cloud is the black underside. And that black underside of the cloud is what we would consider the dark side of fantasy. Fantasies has all these different ranges. A lot of my fantasies, my books are fantasy basically. They're action adventure books. They portray women as successful, strong, and dangerous. So all my women are successful, strong, and dangerous. And that was another Microsoft thing coming up to tell me something I didn't want to know. Anyway, my other book, one of my first books, Identity, that one had a lot of fact in it. Now, there are different kinds of facts as well, just as there's different kinds of fantasies, there's different kinds of facts. First of all, there's the fact that you know. I know what facts I've got. These are my facts. I understand them. Then there's the facts that we know. We both know these facts, and we both agree with those facts. And then there's the other facts, and these are other people's point. So that's their facts. And then there's the last fact, and that's the truth. And that is the last fact there is. And some things you can't bend, so it always ends up to be the truth. And I like the truth to end up in my stories as much as possible. So I combined in Red Bitch's Revenge, what I do in that one, it's based in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta for a while. I visit Atlanta frequently, so it's someplace I know. Also Charleston, Virginia, New Orleans, I lived there for a while and had a place there for a while, and I visit New Orleans frequently. Kind of love it there. And then there's Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and I lived in North Miami for quite some time, and I know that area very well. So when I describe the locations, that is true fact. They are there, or were there at one time, but it's true fact. So when you put these together, these make your story. So even if your story is autobiography and truth, that is your truth. It may not be our truth, and it may not be the real truth. Then if you're writing fantasy, this is minor action adventures. They can be suspense. They can be just about anything you want. Now that's going to be fantasy. And you can do that as many ways as you want. One of the things that I do, and a lot of other people do when they're writing, I do research. And so in Red Bitch's Revenge, Dana, as you heard from the number 3 video, that she is a martial arts expert. She's very, very good at martial arts. Well, I talked about the first 5 chapters that I threw away, that I cut out of the book completely. And in those chapters, I was explaining how Dana got to be a martial arts expert. She learned it from her mother. And her mother her father was in the Air Force, and he traveled around the Middle East, Guam, Japan, China, Singapore, Indonesia, all over. And as a young girl, she traveled all over with her parents, her mom and dad. Well, to keep her under control somewhat, they would send her to the dojos. And so she learned her martial arts at the dojos. She learned there are 10 different martial arts skills, and she learned the 10 different martial arts skills, traveling with her father, and she learned these over a number of years. So when she comes back to the States, she falls in love with Christian, and Christian he owns an art gallery. And so they fall in love, and the art gallery becomes a central feature of the book. And so does Christian, and so does Eve, her mother. But that's where she learned her skills from. Now, it was important for me to write those first 5 chapters, but you didn't want to read them. It's just too cumbersome and too boring. That's why they got cut out. Then the other side of that one is I had then researched all 10 of those martial arts skills. I found out there was 10. I researched each one of them. And so people who've read my book who are martial arts people, they say that they ask me if I'm a martial arts expert. No. Like, I know what the moves are, I can describe them, but they're not automatic. They don't come to me automatically. I have to think about them, but by the time I thought about it, I would probably be hit upside the head. Anyway, so I'm not an expert, but I know about them. So it's study, and that's facts. Those martial arts skills are facts, but then they've filled into the story as fantasies. And you can see how that goes now, the fact versus fantasy. Now, different books and different authors start out different ways. When I started out writing this book, Identity, I started out, the first chapter is pretty much straight truth. That was my truth. And that thing popped up on the screen again. It's my truth. And it popped up. And Identity. So that first chapter was totally my truth. It's the way I remembered that portion of my life. Then the rest of it, as I went through some of those chapters and some of those incidents, were my truths. I knew they happened. I was part of them. So that's how those things happen. When I got to the middle of the book, then I started then I started writing fantasy. And there was fantasy in the beginning, which were like the streaks of the clouds. There were the fantasies that worked in with the facts. And then when I got to about the middle of the book, then fantasy took over, and it was like the big white fluffy cloud for those fantasies, because that's an adventure, journey, and love story in that one. So that's what that book's all about. It's not in the series. It was one of my first books, but it's not in the series. When I went to do The Red Bitch's Revenge, I did that one on purpose to be part of a series. And there's going to be at least 3 books in a series, because I'm almost through with Angel the Assassin at this point. So that should be coming up anytime. And so I'm working on that. Now there's one other thing, and that is I started writing poetry and short stories at a very young age. And when I look at my poetry, I find it interesting in that some of those poems that I wrote are fact, my facts. And some of them are total fantasies. And some of them are a mix, but not often. So it's facts and fantasies. And so I see poetry that way, as a mixture of facts and fantasies. Now, on my website, Jane's Adventures in Storyland, real easy to remember, but it's a long www.janesadventuresinstoryland.com. On there you can find some of my short stories and some of my poetry, which I've put onto that particular section of the book of my website. And you can look at those and read them. They're free. A lot of people enjoyed them, so no problem there. And there's also then a section which is a blog, which is about my writing life, and I try to blog in there every once in a while about things that are going on with me as a writer. And then as you go, another one is my life, so it describes what I've gone through in my different parts of my life, if you have an interest in that. And then that's about the novels, and then you'll see little blurbs, which are from the backs of the books on each of the novels. So, like I say, if you can buy The Red Bitch's Revenge and Identity anywhere. They're on Kindle. They're in ebooks, paperback. The Red Bitch's Revenge is a hardback, but Identity is only in paperback and ebooks, and they can be purchased anywhere. They're on around the world. Like I say, when I learned a lot when I published Identity, I learned about a lot of mistakes that I made, and so I cleaned those up when I did The Red Bitch's Revenge, and spent a lot of time working on publishing. So anyway, if you'd like to, stop into the website. And thank you very much for your time today. And you have a wonderful, wonderful, safe weekend. Bye.